Hello, everybody. Welcome and happy holidays. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our special virtual studio visit with Phillip K. Smith. I'm Rochelle Steiner, Chief Curator and Director of Curatorial Affairs and Programs at the Palm Springs Art Museum, and we're so delighted that you've joined us this evening. I'm going to introduce Phillip K. Smith in a moment. But first, I would like to thank so much Phillip's team, who has been so instrumental in bringing this evening's program together, and also our team from the Palm Springs Art Museum, who are behind the scenes, behind the cameras, in all kinds of ways to deliver this program to you today. Funding for this program is made possible in part by the Coweta and Donald Barker Foundation. And we are also so thankful to our trustees and of course to our director and CEO, Louis Grouchos, for all the support for our programs here at the Palm Springs Art Museum. A version of this talk with closed captioning will be available on YouTube in the week following this event by clicking the closed caption CC button on your screen on YouTube. Before we begin, I'd just like to highlight our next program with Elizabeth Smith, who will give a presentation on case study architecture on Wednesday, January 13th. You will find information about this on our website, in e-news, and social media. So now, without any further delay, Phillip K. Smith. The third, many of you are familiar with him and with his work, but for a little bit of formality, Phillip is based here in the desert. He is a trained artist and architect, and he works at the intersection of art and the built environment. He is known for creating large-scale temporary installations such as Lucid Stead, which we'll talk about in a moment, located in Joshua Tree, as well as Reflection Field and Portals at the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival, Quarter Mile Arc in Laguna Beach, and the Circle of Land and Sky at the inaugural 2017 Desert X exhibition. His public artworks are cited in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Kansas City, Nashville, and beyond. And his work is included in the collection of the Palm Springs Art Museum. We are so lucky. I am seated here in front of the work in our collection, which we will also talk about tonight. I'm happy to tell you a little bit about how we're going to outline tonight. Phillip and I are going to have a discussion about art, architecture, light, color, and the desert. We're going to look at artworks in situ, in his studio, and in the museum's collection. And we're going to talk about how the place we live in has so inspired his work. Also, we are going to consider this particular time that we're living in, 2020, as it comes to a close, and we welcome in 2021. So first, we'd like to start with an introduction of Phillip's art by looking at one of his most iconic pieces, Lucid Stead. We're going to start by watching a short video shot in the desert right now, and then we are going to discuss it.
Lucid Stead is really a collaboration with a 70-year-old existing homesteader shack that was here on
Colin, have we lost sound?
The cracks and the broken wood and the nails that are within it are all part of that existing structure that you might say has taken 70 years to get to this point today. By day, it's a mirrored structure that reflects the desert. By night, it's a projected light installation where LED lighting creates fields of color that are slowly moving through the color wheel. This project is about tapping into the desert into the pace of change and is about responding to the quiet of the place. And ultimately, in that quiet, the project begins to unfold. It's really about kind of four ideas, and that is light and shadow, reflected light, projected light, and change. The light and shadow is about the interaction with the sun, and that the project varies dramatically from sunrise to 9 a.m. to noon to 3 to dusk and into the evening. At dusk, there's the reflection of the sunset within it, while the windows and the doorway are slowly shifting through the color wheel. The reflected light is within the mirrors itself, reflecting the desert around it, using the desert really as material and medium and placing it onto the side of the shack. The projected light is at night, and the sort of comes from the inside out, where lights on the interior begin to reveal the structure of the shack, the 2x4s, the diagonal bracing, sort of as lit lines wrapping around the structure. Yet within it are the four windows in the doorway as pure fields of color that are set at just the right pace of change that you're not entirely aware that they're changing. You might see red, blue, and yellow, look down, move 10 feet, and realize that now it's purple, orange, and green. So the project really is about slowing down and coming to the desert to tap into that pace of change, and about stopping and being quiet so that you can truly see and listen.
So Philip, light, color, and change are some of the key points that you highlight here and that seem to be critical within your work. So can you start by talking about those as critical elements that influence your practice?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you for having me and for making tonight possible. The desert itself is such a powerful place. And what was exciting about Lucid Stead was the site itself. And, spending time out in the middle of the quiet of the desert is an opportunity to be in a fully immersive environment, something where you're able to kind of focus on what's around you. And because of that immersiveness and that quiet, I think you were actually really able to kind of see and hear, maybe for the first time, the beauty that's all around you. And so the desert is this kind of constant, inspiring source for me about color, about light, about change. It's sort of part of my daily life. So in a way, of course, it's found its way into my work and into my studio practice.
Fantastic. It's such an amazing piece. And I know that it's a cornerstone of many other pieces, which we'll talk about how it in turn has catalyzed many aspects of your practice. Now we're going to move into the studio itself from outside to inside. And this image here is something that I'm so familiar with upon arriving at your studio. And just as a little bit of a note, so I have made many visits happily and luckily to Philip's studio. We shot quite a bit of footage in the summer. which is why you'll see us wearing short sleeves and sandals throughout this imagery. And we're going to talk to you about some of the things that were relevant then and continue to be relevant now as we have an ongoing conversation about Philip's work and about the desert. But Philip, this wall in your studio, it seems like a compendium of many ideas and thoughts that are in play. So can you give us an introduction to this wall and to your practice?
Yeah, this grid of about 100 images is sort of a slice of my brain, you could say. You know, all of the different projects and ideas that either have been built or are in the process or that one day will be built. And I like having this for myself. It's a space I walk through every single day as I'm walking, you know, up to the office or out into the studio space, and it's a kind of reminder of, I think, the scale of the studio and what we've accomplished. But also, I like to be able to kind of push all these ideas together on a singular surface, because my brain begins to connect the dots between certain things that maybe I hadn't seen before. And just having that kind of visual language out there begins to set a kind of foundation or context from which I can begin to think about projects and new ideas.
So it's very interesting, and we'll come back to this. On the lower left corner, you'll see the piece that's here in the museum behind me. Right. Similar pieces to what is behind you in your studio space, where you're seated tonight, are hanging on this wall, and we're going to talk about that as well. And I like to think of this as a kind of mapping of these different ideas that you seem to be circling through, and a kind of continuation of thought processes.
Yeah, I think too, it's very much about scale, and you know, the ability to kind of work on a piece like what's behind both of us, a kind of, let's say, a 3 foot, 4 foot scale, up to, I can see, you know, the red column of inhale exhale. It's a 50-foot tall fiberglass column. I can see you know, Lucid Stead. I can see 50-foot reflective stainless steel zigzag proposal that is about reflecting sky and water. And so there's a lot of different scales that are represented on that wall, different locations, different sites, different ideas, and all of them sort of end up in the studio and sort of find their foundation on this wall and on my drawing desk upstairs.
Fantastic. So now we're going to dive further into the studio and show you, everybody, a little bit more about Philip's practice. And as you're watching this, we're going to talk a little bit. One of the most pervasive aspects of your studio work is color. It seems that you're always experimenting with different ways to experience permutations of color. So could you talk about that a little bit as we're looking at this work in your studio?
Yeah, it's actually, in a way, I could say that if I look back at my career, I'm sort of surprised that I've ended up making work like this, because trained as an architect, there was virtually zero training in color. You know, I mean, color was almost considered to be extra. You know, material was material, glass was glass, steel is steel. And so I've sort of come to color and light through my experiences in the desert. And, you know, for 14 years, my studio was located in India, about 25 minutes to the east from where I am now. And every day when I was driving home to Palm Desert, I would drive on I-10 headed west and would stare at the sunset every single day for 14 years. And I think that just being in that world and seeing that change and that color and that immense scale happening in front of me every single day, it sort of made me question how I could take a snippet of that gradient and bring it into my work. How would that actually be possible? And so I think that, combined with you know, the reality that I would say that I would not be able to be doing what I'm doing if it weren't for people like Terrell and Irwin and Flavin that said it's okay to use light as a material. You know, I mean, it's really a very new idea. And so I feel like I'm sort of part of a next or maybe a second or third generation of light artists, and sort of still blazing a path as the technology and materiality improve and change every year. But also as my experience deepens in this desert and my relationship with the sky.
Well, it's interesting because a number of these artists who you've mentioned, Terrell and Irwin particularly, were very influenced by this region. These are light and space artists who took their cues from what they saw in the atmosphere and brought that into immersive environments and immersive installations. So is this something that you studied or something that came to you later? How did you come to their work?
It came to me later, and it came to me really even once I moved back to the desert, which was in 2000. I had 11 years on the East Coast, and I think coming back to the desert, I remember the first 3 months when I moved back was a kind of intense recalibration of my eyes. And I spent a lot of time out of the Salton Sea, which is this huge body of water in the middle of the desert that is this amazing reflective surface where the desert meets water. And I think it was during that time that I began to simply be influenced by the environment and began to be aware of the light and space artists. And I feel certainly akin to them simply because they were, I think, just daily overwhelmed by the beauty that was in front of them and sort of questioning, like, how can I capture that fog into an object, right? I mean, like questions that I don't think had ever been asked before. And so these qualities of color, when I see this image on the screen here, I'm thinking about that deep blue that's happening in the eastern sky at sunset, while the yellows, oranges, and pinks are happening to the west. And that has become, the sky's become my kind of number one inspiration for the best spectrum of light that exists out there. Ultimately, in terms of colored light, we have almost a kind of crayon box kind of understanding when you think about it. It's sort of through signage. It's like yellow, blue, green, yellow. So, but the sky has dark electric browns and navy blue electric quality to it. And so it's just a constantly kind of hazy whites that are foggy and yellow and golden and brown. And so those kinds of in-between colors is what I've really been trying to study and bring to the work.
Yes, well, it's so apparent. It's so apparent in your work that these colors are infiltrating the installations and everything that you bring to us. I think now I'd like to bring everybody into what is my favorite corner of your studio and show everybody this aspect. We have a loop that we're going to roll. And in this corner, this footage was shot in the summer, as I mentioned, in June 2020, early in the pandemic. And we wanted to capture the experience of looking at the work together. The footage is quite low tech, which is why you're not hearing the sound. It was shot literally on an iPhone, the two of us, with Philip's assistant. But we want to give you a sense of this corner of the studio, which I find to be so incredibly compelling. And Philip is going to tell us a little bit about how this relates to Lucid Stead, almost an inside out view of what you saw earlier on the video.
Yeah, this piece is called Lucid Stead, 4 Windows and a Doorway. And it's really the kind of true artifacts from the original installation. So that window that we're seeing right now is the large window that was on the back side of Lucid Stead. The doorway is there, the corner window we're seeing reflected in that green. The blue is the doorway there. But now in this white walled space, the installation has sort of been turned inside out. These were all facing out into the desert, reflecting the desert, tinting the desert these different colors. But now in this space, the desert is gone, the shack is gone, and with everything turned inside out, they're now interacting with each other, and we're actually interacting with floating color. So we're seeing here green and red making yellow, orange. You're seeing the mirrored edges revealing the true color of what's behind you. So it really is kind of a space that you step into. Still, there's a kind of memory of the shack and that original layout of the four windows in the doorway. But now it's an entirely different work that is really solely about color and a reflective space.
One of the things that I think is so interesting about this is that because we can recognize these spaces and frames as doors and windows, there is a sense of human scale, and this is anchoring. So even if we don't know that this was part of the original shack, there is a kind of identification with a door, a window here. So how much of that were you thinking about in terms of anchoring us in your physical location?
I think that that's something that really, comes out as soon as the shack is gone, right? As soon as the armature is gone, we're sort of able to, I think, experience the door and kind of oscillate between the kind of abstract quality of this field of color and the recognition that this is a kind of human scaled object. But certainly all of these shapes and sizes come from the kind of minimum requirements of a homesteader shack. You're required to build this kind of 16-foot by 21-foot dimensioned home that was kind of almost like a child's drawing of a house. And so I think that the kind of pure, kind of simplistic understanding of what a house is maintained in the proportions and the layout of these four windows and doorway.
Yes. And then at the same time, there's almost a kind of sense that these might be screens. We're so used to looking at screens, especially over the last 9 months. The windows almost become screens. The doors almost become portals to other spaces. So there is simultaneously an anchoring and an almost otherworldliness that I find in this corner, which is why I'm always so compelled to come to this area of your studio.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like the installation itself. There was an approach from afar where you sort of saw the whole piece in its whole, and you saw it within the space of the desert. But then you step up to the window itself, you see yourself in it, and you recognize that there's a space on the other side of that glass that you recognize because you've just walked through it. But now you're looking at it through this tint of color. And when you hang out there for a while, your eye and your brain really begin to question kind of which side you're on. It's trying to process this color, because it's being faced with a wall of color is not something that we typically experience, right? And that also it's changing and it's reflective and it's merging with the other volumes around it. So there's a kind of mystery built into the work that I think is part of the excitement too, is that you recognize to some degree what's happening, but ultimately you have no idea what's happening. And that's part of the kind of leap of faith of giving yourself over to the purity of the experience.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is how Lucid Stead has catalyzed many projects for you. So it is the catalyst also for this work in our collection behind me, which we're going to take a look at a little bit more in detail. We have the pleasure of having this work in our collection. And I think we're going to go to looking at that on the screen. So can you tell us about this piece, which is from 2015?
Yeah, that's Lucid Stead element number 4. I made 8 elements. And the elements came from really myself being able to spend time for about 3 months out at Lucid Stead. Originally, the installation was only supposed to be up for 5 days. But there was such a kind of frenzy of people to come see it that it ended up being out there for about 3 months, which was beneficial for me as well, because I was able to spend time with the installation. And one of the last things I did was take a series of kind of cropped photographs of the shack and sort of snippets of window with the with the 70-year-old wood and the pure reflection of the desert, and began to think about how those crop views could begin to be new works. And so that's a whole series called the Lucid Set Elements, where I take the elements of the shack itself. That's the original wood siding, and that's the true mirror, and then there's the color changing mirror, all seen on the armature of the kind of 2x4 wood structure with a white light coming through. So in a way, that piece behind you is very much representative of these crop views of the shack itself.
And Philip, there's also an incredible work behind you. I think we're trying to enlarge that a little bit so people can see that larger screen. Okay. But can you talk to us a little bit about that great work behind you as well?
Yeah, this is Taurus IX, and it's from my Lightworks series. And I was just beginning the Lightworks series when Lucid Stead was created, and was beginning to have an understanding of light and pace of change. And so this piece is Taurus IX. There's 8 others prior in different scales, different logics. But ultimately, it's a series, a kind of composition of these concentric circles of light that are slowly shifting and moving. This one in particular is a bit different than the others because it really specifically looks at the sky at sunset. I was talking about the difference in colorations between the eastern sky and the western sky. So from the outside in is all the warm colors, the yellows, the oranges, the reds, and a bit of purple. And then on the wall itself, this kind of hovering bed of light that the piece is sitting on are the cool colors that are happening in the eastern sky, the kind of blues and greens. And this is the only piece where I don't know what's going to happen next. Every other piece I've ever done, I've really kind of treated it like, if you will, a kind of animated painting where I am placing that light, placing the color, placing the brightness and the pace of change. This is one where I set parameters into which the piece would operate. And then sort of when it comes on, it's allowed to kind of live and breathe within those parameters. It's a little bit like the sunset every day. You know, we could look at a farmer's almanac and have all kinds of statistics about the sunset today and the angle off of the horizon and where it is positioned, all these numbers, but nothing could tell us the colors of the sky that day. So in a way, this piece has been formulated like that. There's sort of a series of numbers and facts that define it, but it's able to live and breathe and find its own way of living within those numbers.
So are you saying what I hadn't realized, what you're saying is that in a way it's incredibly mathematically engineered, but then there's a lot of chance within this. And the experience every day of the piece is unique. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, in theory, what's happening behind me will never be seen again, a bit like every sunset.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. It's a really beautiful piece. Thank you for showing it to us, and thank you for talking to us about it. Yeah. I'd like to talk about some of your other very large scale projects, and we have some pictures of them. The first one we're going to look at here is called 10 Columns, and this was a gorgeous immersive installation that was on view in Los Angeles last year, and I think the beginning of this year. It also was continually changing in terms of light and color. I had the opportunity to go visit it a few times. But you also reinstalled this work so that it became a completely different project. Can you talk about how you were responding to this space and to the opportunity for change?
Yeah, this installation came about really as a commission, as the inaugural show for Bridge Projects that was opening as a new exhibition space in West Los Angeles, West Hollywood. And when they showed me the space, it was this kind of early 1900s transportation trolley building. It was all concrete, 7,000 square feet. And there were these 10 concrete columns that were scattered throughout the space on a kind of offset grid. And I thought, for an inaugural show that I didn't want to put any work on the wall. Every gallery does that. Rather, I wanted to allow color to cantilever within that space. So it was about setting a datum, sort of a level height of reflection and color, through which all of these volumes would begin to interact. And so cantilevered off of the 10 columns are these mirrored LED volumes that are creating planar conditions, T-shaped conditions, plus shape signs, so that as you move through it, you're sort of creating, in a way, your own kind of abstract painting in color and reflection that's responsive to where you are in the space. But also not only is it changing because of your angle of reflection and your movement, but also through, I think it was about an hour and a half long color choreography that I created for this, that was really allowing the entire space to kind of just shift and become very dark or very bright or all red or all yellow, or shift into warms and cools. And all of that changed as you walk through that space. And it was a little bit alarming too, coming in off of the street, right? You're used to driving in LA and the traffic and finding a parking space, and you finally walk through the door and all the lights are off and the door closes, and kind of instantly Los Angeles is gone and you're in this space of reflection and color. And it was really about taking the pace of the viewers and slowing them down so that they could simply give themselves over to this experience and sort of be immersed in light and reflection.
Yeah. One of the things that I felt when I was in the space, kind of recollecting, I looked at some of the notes that I made when I was in the space in preparation for this talk tonight, is that on the one hand, it was a very cold and empty space and the work is very minimal. And on the other hand, it almost felt like this installation breathed. There is a sense of organicism for me, and I think possibly for others who went to see it, that it was very transformative. And I wonder if you could talk about that kind of organicism that also underpins your work.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you had that experience, that sense of breath, because that's how I think about color and how color changes. I think about it as inhaling red and exhaling blue. And there's a kind of slow meditative pace to that, so that you can become one with that color. I think too, I've always been fascinated with minimalism. I think it's a bit cold, but I love the idea of distilling an idea to the kind of pure essentials. But I also like the quality of, let's say, the sun hitting you on the shoulder when you're in the canyon in the desert, right? And that sense of warmth and quality that ultimately you are in a minimal environment in that desert scape. So I'm trying to always kind of ride this line between this distillation of idea and thought with this kind of enveloping of color and this sense of life that's being brought to the work, that it is a kind of living organism, and that really you're not sure what's going to happen next, but that it is about interaction. All of these pieces were at sort of the height of a human, so that you saw yourself and you were kind of conversing with the work as you walk through the gallery space. So that back and forth and sense of breath is really about humanity, but about interaction.
Yes, I think this is the kind of physicality of your work, that there is a sense that there is an interaction with a human being. It is about not the empty space, but about the space as it is embodied by us. And the kind of embodiment is the interaction with the work itself. So I think that physical experience is what we come back to, whether it's about human scale or the transformative colors that have a kind of life of their own, and how you regulate your own experience of that in relation to this evolving pattern and rhythm. There is a sense of kind of rhythmic change within the work.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's sort of living light, that it is absolutely an organism, and that, like I said, you can begin to interact with it and and it sort of requires that of you. But I think through slowing down, you begin to understand what your conversation is with the work that's going to be very different than someone else walking into that space.
Yes.
It's really kind of about you.
Yes, it's all very individualized experiences of your work.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to look at the next large-scale installation, which you created in Laguna, and this is called Quarter Mile Arc. And we have a few pictures of this. It's so gorgeously installed at the shoreline. So can you talk to us a little bit about creating this piece and your inspiration?
Yeah, this was an amazing experience because I've been going to Laguna since I was a small boy for my dad's birthday, and always spending time in the summer in Laguna. And so in a way, it was a space that I was familiar with, but it was really a commission through the Laguna Art Museum for their art and nature program. They had done a series of large-scale installations and performances on Main Beach. And when they invited me to come out to Laguna to see the site, we walked out with Malcolm and Marinta and some other people from the museum, and we walked out to on the boardwalk, and there's the infinite ocean and sky in front of you, and like 2 miles to the south, 2 miles to the north, and it's sort of like, well, here it is. Here's your site. And so the scale is just so epic, right? And that's why we come to the beach is this kind of meeting of water and sky that is infinite and pure, and that your view in front of you is distilled down to two elements and two elements only. So, when I was out there, I really thought to myself, how is it possible to make anything more beautiful than a Laguna sunset? And I began to think about that, and I began to think about drawing. Drawing for me has always been at the root of all of my ideas. Everything that I make starts through drawing. It's how I think. And began to think about a drawing on the beach itself, and maybe that it could be somehow a reflective drawing. I didn't really know what that meant, but ultimately, the idea of using the sky and the environment of Laguna itself as the medium within the work, like I did in Lucid Stead, was the thought. And so ultimately, this is a 1/4 mile long arc that follows the natural radius of the kind of bay of Main Beach. But these are 10-foot high, 4-inch by 4-inch mirror polished stainless steel reflectors. And so what you're seeing here is not an electrically lit work. That's not LED color. That's the reflection of the sunset in Laguna Beach. And because the reflectors are perpendicular to the earth, they are reflecting that infinite view that we all see when we're sitting on the beach. So while these are separated by 4.5 feet, you have this kind of beautiful moment at the edge of the arc, and you could sight down and have this kind of compressed, collaged, reflective view of the environment itself.
Well, it's just so gorgeous, and it's evident that California and Southern California has influenced your work. I think we're going to finish with a discussion about how the desert has influenced your work, and we started with Lucid Stead, but I'd just like to have you reflect on this idea of the desert. For many decades, centuries, artists have come here to the desert. You're from here, you moved away, you moved back, but to be immersed by this incredible landscape, to have the opportunity to paint, draw, sculpt, in your case, sculpt with light, paint with color in your own way. So can you give us some reflections on this incredible place that we live in? And we're so lucky, and many people on this virtual program are not here, but they have been here. Many people are situated right here in the desert, but this is a place that has inspired artists ongoingly.
Absolutely. Artists and architects. I think just creatives in general, musicians. You think about Joshua Tree, where Lucidstead was located, is such a just an expansive landscape. And it's really, I think people have always thought about the desert as like, I'm going to head out to the desert to figure out my life. Like it's always represented a kind of clean slate and a pure environment in which you are able to question the big questions of your life. Why, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? What are my priorities? And the desert has a way of pushing away the noise and allowing you to get down to the real deal, the real facts, the real experience. Um, I live and work in that environment every day. And um, I enjoy that questioning every day and that recalibration every day. Um, but also, it is an environment where all that's required of you to witness the beauty is to slow down and stop. We're so used to kind of intense energy of social media and news and work and family and the stuff, like all of the things that we're kind of bombarded with. And I think a lot of us, especially right now, 2020 is almost over, and we are ready to move on. And I think, though, even this year has brought about a kind of questioning for all of us of, hey, what am I doing? What is important in my life? And so this slowing down and analysis of what's in front of you and staring at nature, staring at a perfect gradient of sky, allows you to, I think, reconnect with the earth, to reconnect with the bigger picture, to reconnect with things that are more important than you, and to maybe get back to what it is that you're supposed to be doing. But also, I think to find the kind of purest installation or purest inspiration in the light and the scale that's in front of you. There's beauty every single day in front of you, and all you have to do to view it is to stop and look. That's it.
Well, this is some of the greatest inspiration we can possibly have for what has been an incredibly tough year. We have had the opportunity come 120-degree heat or come rainstorm yesterday, some of the extremes here in the desert, to be able to witness within that some incredible change of plants, of scenery, of course, sky every morning is just an incredible light show looking out the window. And you bring our attention to that through your work. So we're very lucky to have your work in our collection. It's changing constantly as it's on view for the public, but also just to remind us every day that we start anew and we look. And that is what we come to you as an artist, as an architect, as a thinker, to remind us.
Well, thanks. I will say, during this time, we're all here on laptops and TVs, desiring to be connected, right? And I think that, through my work, particularly through the use of light and color, is sort of using these elements that all of us know and that ultimately bond all of us together. The one thing that is common amongst all of us on the earth is that the sky is over our head. And so that is sort of one of the big reasons why that is a singular source of inspiration for me, because it's a common language for all of us. It's an opportunity to feel connected in a sense of a universal beauty that bonds all of us together across the globe. And that if I'm doing a good job as an artist, I feel like I am bonding people together through that beauty and bonding all of us together through that shared experience.
Well, thank you so much, Phillip, for welcoming us into your studio, for sharing your practice with us, and for sharing this experience, and for encouraging us to find ways of commonality despite all of the separation. It has been a hard year. We're all looking forward to 2021. We will continue to have more programs like this that bring us together. This one has been particularly special during this holiday period, and we thank you so much for your willingness to do this between the holiday period when everybody is trying to spend time virtually with family in different ways. But this is a family of people who are interested in art and architecture and support the Palm Springs Art Museum. So thank you so much for being a part of that. Our
Well, thanks for
next,
making it happen, Michelle.
of course, we've been looking forward to this since we came, we filmed together in the summer. So we're glad it could come to fruition.
Indeed.
Our next program will be on January 13th, and this will be a lecture on mid-century case study architecture, and the themes of architecture and Southern California region will continue. So we hope you will join us that day at 5 o'clock. The link for this program will be viewable for a week. If you would like to watch this again, we hope you will. And this now concludes our public presentation. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll attend more of our events and keep an eye out for virtual programs which are announced on e-news